The shuttle shook hard, and Danny Cole grabbed the metal bar above his head. Red lights flashed everywhere. The alarm screamed so loud that he could barely hear Morgan yelling from the pilot's seat. "Asteroid field, it's not on the maps," she shouted. Her hands moved fast across the controls. "Hold on." Danny looked through the small window and saw rocks flying past them. Big ones, small ones, all of them moving fast and deadly. The shuttle turned left, then right, trying to avoid them, but there were too many. Ben, the engineer, ran past Danny toward the back of the shuttle. "The shield generator is failing," he yelled. "I need to." He never finished his sentence. A massive rock hit the side of the shuttle. The wall exploded inward. Metal flew through the air like knives. Danny felt himself lifted off his feet and thrown across the cargo bay. His body hit the opposite wall with a terrible sound, and then everything went dark. When Danny opened his eyes, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The alarm had stopped. The engines were dead. The only sound was the soft hiss of air escaping through holes in the hull. He tried to move, and pain shot through his entire body. It felt like someone had broken him into pieces and put him back together wrong. His left arm hung at a strange angle. When he tried to breathe, his ribs screamed at him. His legs felt like they were filled with broken glass. Danny had been a combat medic for 8 years. He knew injuries. He knew what broken bones felt like. And right now, his body was telling him that something was very, very wrong. But he pushed that thought away. He had to find his crew. He rolled onto his stomach and started to crawl. Every movement was agony. Every inch felt like a mile. The floor was covered with broken glass, twisted metal, and sparking wires. Smoke filled the air, making it hard to see and harder to breathe. He called out. His voice was weak. "Ben." No answer. He kept crawling. The shuttle had been small, just a transport vehicle for the 3 of them. They were supposed to be joining the main ship after a quick supply run. A simple mission. Nothing dangerous. The universe had other plans. Danny found Ben first. The engineer was lying under a pile of metal panels. His face was pale and blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but his chest was moving. He was alive. Danny grabbed the panels and tried to lift them. His left arm refused to work, so he used only his right. The pain was unbelievable. He felt something shift inside his chest, probably a rib moving in a way it shouldn't, but he kept pulling. Finally, Ben was free. Danny checked his pulse, weak but steady. He had to move him somewhere safe, somewhere with air. But first, he needed to find. He crawled toward the front of the shuttle, toward the pilot's seat. The cockpit was destroyed. The front window was cracked and the control panel was on fire. And there was, still strapped into her seat, her head hanging to one side. Danny pulled himself up using the seat and checked her neck for a pulse. For a terrible moment he felt nothing. Then there it was, faint but there. "Okay," he whispered to himself. "Okay, they're alive, now get them out." He looked around. Through the cracked window he could see that they had crashed on some kind of moon. The ground outside was gray and rocky, and in the distance, maybe 100 meters away, there was a light, a building, a structure of some kind. That was their chance. Danny unbuckled from her seat and carefully lowered her to the floor. Then he grabbed her under the arms and started to drag her toward the back of the shuttle, toward the emergency exit. His body screamed at him to stop. His left arm was useless. His right ankle sent sharp pain up his leg every time he put weight on it. Something was wrong with his hip, something that made every step feel like fire was burning through his bones. But he didn't stop. He reached the emergency exit and kicked it open. The cold air of the alien moon rushed in. It was thin, barely enough oxygen to breathe, but it was better than the smoke-filled shuttle. Danny dragged outside and laid her on the ground. Then he went back for Ben. The engineer was heavier than Danny had to use every bit of strength he had left. He grabbed Ben's arms and pulled. His vision started to blur. Black spots appeared at the edges of his sight. He ignored them. One step, then another, then another. He fell twice. Both times he got back up. When he finally reached the exit, his hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold on. But he pulled Ben outside and laid him next to two crew members, both alive, both safe for now. Danny looked at the light in the distance. 100 meters. It might as well have been 100 miles. But that light was their only hope. Someone was there. Someone who might be able to help. He couldn't carry both of them at the same time, so he picked up first. He lifted her onto his shoulder, his right shoulder, because his left arm couldn't hold anything. His ankle screamed. His ribs stabbed at his lungs. Something inside his pelvis made a grinding sound that couldn't be good. But he started walking. Every step was a battle. Every breath was a victory. The gray ground was uneven, covered with small rocks that tried to trip him. The thin air made his head spin, but he kept moving. He reached the building, a tall structure made of smooth white material, and found what looked like a door. He laid down gently, then turned around and went back for Ben. The second trip was worse. His body was shutting down. He could feel it. His legs barely worked. His vision was almost completely dark at the edges. He fell 3 times on the way. But he kept getting up. When he finally reached the building with Ben, he collapsed against the door. His hands found something that might have been a button, and he pressed it. The door opened, and bright light flooded out. Danny looked up and saw figures standing there. Tall figures, not human. They had too many limbs, too many eyes. They were saying something in a language he didn't understand. "Please," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "Help them, help my crew." Then his legs finally gave out, and Danny Cole fell to the floor of the alien medical station. But even as he fell, he made sure to land on his side, so he wouldn't crush the crew member he had just carried to safety. That was the kind of person he was. That was the kind of person humans could be. And the aliens watching him, they would never forget what they saw that day. Doctor had worked at the Galactic Medical Station for 60 cycles. She had treated warriors from 100 different worlds. She had seen soldiers with missing limbs, pilots with radiation burns, and explorers with strange alien diseases. She thought she had seen everything. She was wrong. The 3 creatures that arrived at her station were unlike anything in her medical database. They were soft, with no protective shell. They had only 2 arms and 2 legs. Their skin was thin and easily damaged. According to her scanner, they had internal skeletons made of something called bone, a material that was surprisingly fragile. Her staff quickly took the 2 unconscious ones to the healing pods. Their injuries were serious but treatable. A few days in the pods and they would recover fully. But the third one, the one who had carried the others, refused to lie down. "Help them first," he kept saying. His voice was rough and tired. "Make sure they're okay, then you can look at me." Studied him with her many eyes. He was covered in blood, his own and his. Burns marked his arms. Cuts covered his face. He was standing, but barely. He swayed like a tree in the wind, and his breathing was shallow and painful. "You need treatment," she said. Her translator turned her clicks and whistles into words he could understand. "You are injured." "I know," the human said, "but they come first." Did not understand this behavior. In her experience, injured creatures wanted help immediately. They cried out in pain. They begged for relief. This human was clearly in extreme pain. She could see it in the way his face muscles tightened with every breath, but he was ignoring it. Finally, after her staff confirmed that the other 2 humans were stable, the man allowed himself to be scanned. Ran the scanner over his body. The results appeared on her screen, and for a moment she thought the machine was broken. She ran the scan again. The same results appeared. She called over her assistant, a young named, and showed him the screen. Eyes went wide with shock. "That cannot be correct," he said. "Run it again," ordered. Ran the scan a third time. The results were the same. The human had 17 fractured bones. His left arm was shattered in 3 separate places. 4 of his ribs were cracked. His right ankle was broken completely. There were hairline fractures spreading through his pelvis like cracks in glass. His liver was bleeding internally. His lungs were bruised from the impact. And he was standing, looking at her, waiting. Had once treated a warrior, one of the toughest species in the galaxy, who had collapsed from 2 broken ribs. She had seen a diplomat pass out from a single fractured arm. Most species in the known universe could not remain conscious with injuries like this, let alone stand upright. But this human was not only standing, he was talking, he was making decisions, he was putting his crew before himself. "Human," she said slowly, "do you understand the extent of your injuries?" "I have a pretty good idea," he replied. A strange expression crossed his face, his mouth curved upward slightly. Later she would learn that humans called this a smile. 17 fractures, right? Maybe 18. Hard to tell with the pelvis. "You knew." "I'm a medic. I know what broken bones feel like." He swayed again and caught himself on a nearby table. "So, are you going to help me, or should I find a chair first?" Did not know what to say. In 60 cycles, she had never met a patient like this. She had never even heard of a patient like this. She ordered her staff to prepare a surgical bay immediately. But even as they worked, she could not stop staring at the human. He was watching the room where his were being treated. His eyes never left that door. "Who are they to you?" she asked. "The ones you carried." "My crew," he said simply. "My friends." "You risked your life for them." The human looked at her with an expression she could not read. "That's what you do for your people. You protect them, no matter what." Thought about this. In her culture, the injured were expected to save themselves first. Resources were limited, and logic dictated that those who could walk should walk. Those who could not were left behind. Humans, it seemed, had a very different logic. The surgery took 6 hours. Had to study human anatomy as she worked, referring constantly to the Galactic Union database. Human bodies were strange, both weaker and stronger than she expected. Their bones broke easily, but they also healed quickly. Their skin was thin, but it could repair itself without medical intervention. And their brains released chemicals that could block pain, increase strength, and push their bodies far beyond normal limits. The database called it adrenaline, called it impossible. When the surgery was complete, the human was placed in a healing pod. His bones were set and held in place with temporary supports. The internal bleeding was stopped. The burns were treated. He should have been unconscious for days. Most species required a full cycle of rest after such extensive surgery. The human woke up after 4 hours. "Where are my crew?" were his first words. Was there when he woke. She had been watching him, taking notes, trying to understand what she was seeing. "They are recovering," she said. "They will survive because of you." The human relaxed slightly. Some of the tension left his face. "Good," he said. "That's good. You should rest. Your body needs time to heal." "I know." He closed his eyes for a moment. "But I needed to make sure they were okay first." Sat down beside his pod. She had many questions, but she started with the most important one. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you walk with those injuries? How did you carry 2 people across 100 meters of rough terrain? How did you stay conscious when your body was failing?" The human opened his eyes and looked at her. "I had people counting on me," he said. "That's all." "That is not an answer." "It's the only one I have." He closed his eyes again. "When someone needs you, you don't think about pain. You don't think about yourself. You just move. You keep moving until the job is done or until you can't move anymore." Recorded his words carefully. She would include them in her report to the Galactic Union. But she knew that no report, no matter how detailed, could truly explain what she had witnessed. The human called Danny Cole had walked into her hospital with 17 fractured bones, internal bleeding, and burns covering his arms. He had carried 2 unconscious crew members through an alien landscape. He had refused treatment until his friends were safe. And when she asked him why, he acted as if the answer was obvious, as if anyone would have done the same. But knew better. She had treated patients from 100 worlds, and none of them, not one, could have done what this human had done. She looked at Danny Cole sleeping in his healing pod, and for the first time in 60 cycles, Doctor felt something she had never felt before. She felt afraid. Not of this human, but of what his species might become. News traveled fast in the Galactic Medical Station. By the next morning, everyone knew about the humans. They knew about the crash, about the injuries, and about the man who had walked through fire and pain to save his friends. Staff members whispered about it in the hallways. Patients talked about it in their rooms. Even the cleaning robots seemed to buzz with extra energy. And then the visitors started to arrive. First came the traders. A group of merchants who had been passing through the system heard the story and changed their course just to see the humans. They stood outside the medical bay, their many eyes pressed against the observation window, watching Danny Cole like he was some kind of rare animal. "He looks so small," one of them said, "so fragile. Are you sure this is the same creature?" "Check the medical records," another replied. 17 fractures. He should be dead 10 times over. Then came the diplomats. An ambassador named arrived with his staff, claiming he needed to assess the situation for political purposes. But everyone knew the truth. He was curious. He wanted to see the impossible human with his own eyes. Was a thin, elegant creature with silver skin and large, dark eyes. He had spent his entire life studying different species, learning their strengths and weaknesses. He thought he understood the galaxy. But watching Danny Cole through the observation window, he realized he had missed something important. "Their files say they are a young species," murmured to his assistant. "Only a few thousand years of recorded history. They should be primitive, weak. But this—" "Perhaps the files are wrong," his assistant suggested. "Perhaps," agreed, "or perhaps we have underestimated them." The biggest stir came when they arrived. They were warriors. Their entire culture was built around strength, battle, and honor. They were twice the size of humans, with thick armored skin and muscles that could crush stone. In any fight, a was expected to win. 3 of them came to the station, a war chief named and 2 of his soldiers. They did not ask permission. They simply walked into the observation area and demanded to see the human. Was massive, even by standards. Scars covered his body, each one telling the story of a battle won. He had killed enemies with his bare hands. He had survived wounds that would have killed most creatures. He thought he knew what strength looked like. But when he looked at Danny Cole, this small, soft, fragile human, he saw something that made him pause. The human was awake now. He was sitting up in his bed, talking to one of the alien nurses. His left arm was in a support cast. Bandages covered his chest. But he was smiling at the nurse, making gestures with his good hand, trying to communicate despite the language barrier. "He should be screaming," said quietly. "With those injuries, he should be crying out for pain medication. He should be begging for death." One of his soldiers nodded. "The doctors say he has refused the strongest pain blockers. He says they make his mind foggy, and he wants to stay alert in case his crew needs him." Felt something strange in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize it as respect. "I want to speak with him," announced. The medical staff tried to stop him, but no one really stopped a war chief. Walked into the recovery room and stood at the foot of Danny's bed. The human looked up at him without fear. "You are," Danny said. His translator turned his words into sounds could understand. "I've read about your people, great warriors." "And you are human," replied. "I have read nothing about your people, but now I know why." "Why is that?" leaned closer, because there are no words for what you are. Danny tilted his head slightly. I'm just a medic. I'm not a warrior. I've never even been in a real fight. Fighting is not what makes a warrior, said. Pain is everywhere. Suffering is everywhere. Any creature can fight when they are healthy and strong, but a true warrior fights when he is broken. A true warrior keeps moving when his body begs him to stop. He pointed at Danny's bandaged chest. You did not fight enemies on that moon. You fought something worse. You fought your own limits, and you won. Danny was quiet for a moment. Then he shook his head. I just did what I had to do. Anyone would have done the same for their crew. No, his voice was firm. They would not. I have seen soldiers abandon their wounded. I have seen warriors surrender when the pain became too great. What you did is rare. It is precious. He straightened up to his full height. I came here to see if the stories were true. Now I know they are, and I will tell my people. I will tell them that humans are not to be underestimated. He turned and left the room without another word. Later that day, Morgan woke up in her healing pod. The doctors told her what had happened. They told her about the crash, about her injuries, about her rescue. At first, she didn't believe them. Danny carried me, she asked. But he was hurt too. I saw him hit the wall. I heard his bones break. He carried both of you, the nurse confirmed. One at a time across 100 meters of open ground. Felt tears forming in her eyes. How? That's not possible. We thought the same thing, but he did it anyway. They let her visit him that afternoon. She walked slowly, still weak from her own injuries, and found Danny sitting up in bed, arguing with a nurse about getting more food. The portions are too small, he was saying. I'm hungry. Healing takes energy, right? So give me more energy. Danny said softly. He looked up and his face changed completely. The frustration disappeared, replaced by pure relief. You're okay. I'm okay because of you. She walked to his bed and took his hand, his good hand, the one that wasn't in a cast. Ben told me when I was still unconscious. He woke up before me and he told me everything. Her voice shook. 17 broken bones, Danny. You had 17 broken bones and you carried us both. It wasn't that far. It was 100 meters, with a broken ankle, with broken ribs, with a fractured pelvis. She was crying now, tears rolling down her face. You could have died. You should have died. Danny squeezed her hand gently. But I didn't, and neither did you. That's all that matters. How, she whispered, how did you do it? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I just kept thinking about you and Ben. I kept thinking about getting you somewhere safe. And every time my legs wanted to give up, I thought about what would happen if I stopped. If I stopped, you would die. Ben would die, and I couldn't let that happen. Wiped her eyes. I wouldn't have been able to do what you did. I know I wouldn't. You don't know that. You've never been tested like that. Neither had you. Danny smiled slightly. I guess I found out what I'm made of. That night, lay awake in her healing pod, thinking about what Danny had said. She thought about Earth, about their home world, about all the stories of human endurance and courage she had heard growing up. Stories about people who survived impossible situations. Stories about ordinary men and women who became heroes when the moment demanded it. She had always thought those stories were exaggerated. She had always thought they were just legends, told to make humans feel special. Now she knew the truth. The stories were real, and the man who proved it was lying in a bed just a few rooms away, complaining about portion sizes and waiting for his bones to heal. Outside the medical station, the stars shone cold and distant. But inside, a small group of humans was teaching the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Pain was not the end, it was just an obstacle. And humans, fragile, soft, breakable humans, had learned long ago how to overcome obstacles. No matter the cost, Doctor came to Danny's room on the 4th day. She carried a small recording device and a cup of something that smelled strange but looked like tea. She placed the cup on his bedside table and sat down in the chair beside his bed. "I have questions," she said. "Many questions. I hope you will answer them." Danny looked at the cup, sniffed it carefully, and took a small sip. It tasted like flowers mixed with honey. Not bad. "I'll answer what I can. What do you want to know?" "Everything," activated her recording device. "I want to know about your species. I want to know how you did what you did. I want to understand." "That's a big question." "Then start at the beginning." Danny leaned back against his pillows and thought for a moment. Where do you even begin when explaining humanity to an alien? How do you describe millions of years of evolution, thousands of years of history, and countless stories of survival? He decided to start with the planet. "Earth is not a gentle world," he said. "It's not like some planets where the weather is always nice and the predators are small. Earth is full of extremes. We have deserts so hot that water boils on the rocks. We have mountains so cold that your blood would freeze in your veins. We have oceans full of creatures with teeth like knives and forests full of things that want to eat you." Listened carefully, her many eyes focused on his face. "And then there are the disasters," Danny continued. "Earthquakes that shake cities to the ground, volcanoes that bury entire regions in ash, floods that wash away everything, storms that tear buildings apart." He smiled slightly. "Earth is trying to kill us. It has been trying for millions of years, but we're still here." "How?" asked. "Your bodies are not built for survival. You have no natural armor. Your claws are small and weak. You cannot run as fast as other predators. How did you survive?" "Two things," Danny said. "Endurance and stubbornness." He told her about persistence hunting, the ancient way that humans used to catch prey. Other predators were faster than humans, but they could not run for as long. Humans would chase an animal for hours, sometimes for an entire day, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. While other predators needed to catch their food quickly, humans just kept following. Slowly, patiently, until the prey gave up. "We evolved to keep going," Danny explained. "Our bodies learned to push through tiredness, through hunger, through pain. Because if we stopped, we would die. Simple as that." Wrote something on her. "But surely there are limits. Every creature has limits." "Of course we have limits, but those limits are far beyond what you might expect." Danny looked at his bandaged arm. "The human body is designed to keep working even when it's damaged. Our brains can block pain when we need to focus on survival. Our hearts can pump faster, our muscles can work harder, and our minds can ignore everything except the one goal in front of us." The adrenaline response. "That's part of it, but it's not just chemicals, it's something deeper." He struggled to find the right words. "It's will. It's the refusal to give up. We tell ourselves that we can keep going, and somehow we do." Was silent for a long moment. Then she asked, "Can you give me an example, something from your history?" Danny thought about this. There were so many stories he could tell, so many examples of human endurance that seemed impossible until you knew the truth about his species. He told her about soldiers who lost limbs in battle and kept fighting, about explorers who crawled through frozen wastelands for weeks with barely any food, about mothers who lifted objects that should have been too heavy for any human, just to save their children trapped underneath. He told her about runners who collapsed from heat and exhaustion, then got up and finished their races, about survivors of disasters who dug through rubble with their bare hands, breaking their fingers, to rescue strangers they had never met, about ordinary people who ran into burning buildings, not away from them, because someone inside needed help. "These are not special humans," Danny said. "These are not warriors or heroes from birth. These are regular people, teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, who found strength they didn't know they had when the moment demanded it." Set down her. Her expression was hard to read, but Danny thought he saw something like wonder in her eyes. "Lieutenant Cole," she said slowly, "do you understand how remarkable this is? In my 60 cycles of medical work, I have never heard of a species like yours. Every other creature in the galaxy has hard limits. When their bodies break, they stop. When pain becomes too great, they surrender. But you keep going. Even when you should die. Even when logic says it is impossible. Danny shrugged, then winced as the movement hurt his ribs. We don't think about it that way. We just do what needs to be done. But why? What drives you? Danny thought about the question carefully. It was something he had never really considered before. Why did humans push themselves so hard? Why did they refuse to give up when every other species would have stopped? I think it's because we're afraid, he said finally. Looked surprised, afraid. Not of pain or death. Those things happen to everyone. We're afraid of failing the people who count on us. He looked at the wall, toward the rooms where and Ben were recovering. When I was carrying my crew across that moon, I wasn't thinking about my broken bones. I was thinking about what would happen if I left them behind. I was thinking about their families, their friends, the people who would never see them again if I gave up. He turned back to, that fear is stronger than any pain. That fear is what keeps us moving when our bodies want to stop. Was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. Lieutenant Cole, I need to tell you something. When you first arrived at this station, I was confused. I could not understand how you were still alive. I thought perhaps humans were simply too stupid to know when to give up. Danny laughed, which hurt his ribs. That might be part of it. But now I think I understand better. You are not stupid. You are not reckless. You are driven by something that most species in this galaxy have never felt. She paused. You are driven by love. Danny didn't know what to say to that. He had never thought of it in those terms, but maybe she was right. Maybe that was what it came down to in the end. Not strength or endurance or stubborn refusal to die. Just love. The simple, powerful desire to protect the people who mattered. Stood up and gathered her recording device. I will include all of this in my report to the Galactic Union, but I want you to know something, Lieutenant. What's that? She looked at him with an expression that might have been fear, or respect, or both. I have studied many species. I have learned their strengths and their weaknesses, and I have always believed that they were the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. She paused. I no longer believe that. Danny tilted his head. You think humans are more dangerous than the... They are strong, they are powerful, they can crush enemies with their bare hands. Moved toward the door. But they have limits. When their bodies fail, they stop. When the pain becomes too great, they rest. She turned back to look at him one last time. Humans have no such limits. And that, Lieutenant Cole, is the most terrifying thing I have ever learned. She left the room without another word, leaving Danny alone with his thoughts and his slowly healing bones. And somewhere deep inside him, he felt proud. Not proud of himself, proud of his species, proud of every human who had ever pushed through pain, ignored limits, and refused to give up. They were small, they were fragile, they broke easily. But they never, ever stayed broken. 1 week after the crash, Danny Cole was ready to leave. His bones were not fully healed, that would take months, even with the advanced regeneration technology. But they were stable now, held together by supports that would slowly dissolve as his body repaired itself. He could walk without help. He could use his left arm again, though it still hurt when he moved it too quickly. His ribs still ached when he breathed too deeply, but the pain was manageable. And Ben were already back on the Starbound Hope, the main ship that had come to collect them after receiving their distress signal. The shuttle was beyond repair, but the crew was alive. That was all that mattered. Danny stood in front of a mirror in his recovery room looking at himself. His face was still marked with cuts that were slowly healing. Dark circles hung under his eyes from nights of interrupted sleep. He looked tired. He looked old. He looked like someone who had been through something terrible. But he was standing. After everything that had happened, after 17 broken bones and 100 meters of agony, he was still standing. There was a knock at his door. "Come in," he said. Doctor entered carrying a small, "Lieutenant Cole, I wanted to see you before you left. To give me medical advice. To thank you," she set the aside. "You have taught me something important during your stay here, something I did not expect to learn." Danny turned to face her. "What's that?" "That the galaxy is stranger than I thought, and that strength comes in many forms." She moved closer. "I have added your case to the Galactic Union Medical Database. Your story will be studied by doctors across 100 worlds. They will learn from what you did." "I don't know what they'll learn. I just did what anyone would do." Made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You keep saying that, but I have treated patients from 100 species, Lieutenant. None of them could have done what you did. None of them would have even tried." Danny shrugged, then remembered that shrugging still hurt and stopped. Maybe they just never had the chance. Maybe if you put any creature in that situation, they would find a way. "Perhaps," sounded doubtful. "Or perhaps humans are simply different, special in a way that cannot be easily explained." She handed him a small object, a metal disc with strange symbols carved into its surface. "This is a medical token from my people. It marks you as someone who has survived great suffering. On Velar Prime, you would be treated with honor wherever you went." Danny took the token and looked at it. The symbols meant nothing to him, but the weight of the gift was clear. "Thank you. I don't know if I deserve it, but thank you." "You deserve it more than you know." There was another knock at the door. A young nurse poked her head in. "Doctor, the human's transport is ready, and there are visitors, many visitors. They wish to see the human before he leaves." Glanced at Danny. "It seems you have become famous." Danny followed her out of the recovery room and down the long corridor toward the main entrance of the medical station. As he walked, he noticed that the hallway was not empty. Staff members lined the walls, doctors, nurses, cleaning workers, everyone. They watched him pass with expressions he could not quite read. When he reached the main entrance, he stopped in surprise. The entrance hall was full. Aliens of every kind stood packed together, filling the space from wall to wall. He saw merchants with their many eyes. He saw diplomats in their elegant robes. He saw species he did not recognize, tall ones, short ones, creatures made of crystal and creatures covered in fur. And at the front of the crowd, standing taller than everyone else, was the war chief. Danny walked forward slowly, not sure what was happening. Was this some kind of ceremony? Some kind of farewell? Stepped forward to meet him. The massive warrior looked down at Danny with an expression of deep respect. "Human," said, "when you first arrived at this station, I came to see if the stories were true. I wondered if a creature so small and soft could really do the things they said you did." Danny waited, unsure where this was going. "Now I have my answer." Placed one massive hand flat against his own chest over his heart. Then he extended it outward, palm facing Danny. "This is a gesture of my people. It means that I see your spirit, that I honor your strength, that I consider you a true warrior, even though we have never fought side by side." The other in the crowd, the two soldiers who had come with, repeated the gesture. And then, to Danny's amazement, others in the crowd did the same. Nurses placing their many hands over their hearts, diplomats bowing their elegant heads, creatures of a dozen species, all showing respect in their own ways. Danny felt his throat tighten. He didn't know what to say. He had never expected anything like this. He had just been doing his job, trying to save his crew, trying to survive. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't special. But looking at the faces around him, he realized that maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was that ordinary creatures could do extraordinary things when they refused to give up. He returned gesture as best he could, placing his right hand over his heart and extending it outward. His left arm wouldn't quite cooperate, but he did his best. "Thank you," he said. His voice was rough with emotion. "All of you, thank you for saving my crew. Thank you for giving me a second chance." Nodded slowly. You gave yourself that chance, human. We simply helped you along the way. He stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Go now, return to your people, but know that your story will be told in 100 worlds. Wherever warriors gather, they will speak of the human who walked with 17 broken bones. Danny started toward the door, then paused. He turned back to look at the crowd one more time. Can I ask you all something? The room fell silent. Why, Danny said, why did you all come here? Why does my story matter so much to you? It was the ambassador who answered. He stepped forward, his silver skin catching the light. Because you showed us something we had forgotten, said. We have become comfortable in this galaxy. We have our technology, our medicine, our safe ships and protected worlds. We have forgotten what it means to truly struggle, what it means to face impossible odds and refuse to surrender. He gestured at Danny with one slender arm. You reminded us, a small, fragile creature from a young species, carrying his wounded friends across a hostile moon with 17 broken bones. You reminded us that strength is not about size or power or weapons. It is about the will to keep going, no matter what. Danny looked at the faces around him. Alien faces, strange faces, faces from worlds he would never visit and species he barely understood. And in every one of them he saw something familiar. Hope, admiration, a desire to be better. Then don't forget again, Danny said quietly. And if you ever face impossible odds, remember that giving up is the only way to truly lose. He turned and walked through the door, out into the cold air of the alien moon. A small shuttle was waiting for him, its engines humming softly. Through the window, he could see and Ben waving at him. He was still limping. His arm was still in a support cast. His ribs still hurt with every breath. But Danny Cole walked tall. Behind him, Doctor watched until the shuttle lifted off and disappeared into the stars. Then she returned to her office and sat down at her computer. She opened the Galactic Union Species database and found the entry for humans. It was short, just a few lines of basic information about a young species from a small planet in an unremarkable solar system. She deleted the old entry and started typing a new one. Species human Homo. Earth. Physical characteristics. Endoskeleton species moderate size, no natural armor or weapons. Physical threat level, moderate. Endurance threat level, extreme. Psychological threat level, unknown but significant. Notes: do not underestimate, under any circumstances. This species has demonstrated the ability to function with injuries that would incapacitate most other species. They are driven by emotional bonds that can override physical limitations. They do not surrender easily. They do not give up. Recommendation: friendship with this species is strongly advised. Conflict is not recommended. She saved the file and leaned back in her chair. Somewhere out in the stars, a small shuttle was carrying 3 humans back to their ship. 3 fragile, breakable, impossible creatures who had taught an entire galaxy what it meant to be strong. And the galaxy would never forget.